Hey folks, my name is Jean Tiberio, and I'm a nutritionist and wellness coach. Welcome to Healing Outside the Box, where I tiptoe through the minefields of food and nutrition information, and then regurgitate it to hopefully make it less murky. Today I have something called intuitive eating theory for you. But first, I have a holiday story for you, and being the animal lover that I am, it's about animals. Or one in particular. No, I'm sorry, two. This is a story about why we have cats. Do they love us? Hard to know. Do we need them? Oh, yes. I was sleeping in the middle of the night, minding my own business, and my cat Betty woke me up. She seemed to be jumping around the bed. It was like she was chasing her tail, and I said as calmly as possible, "Now, Betty, not the time to be chasing your tail," but she was jumping around chasing her tail anyway, and I eventually fell asleep. So I wake up in the morning, and my home health aide comes in to help get me up. She throws back the covers, and all of a sudden she screams, "Ah!" I'm not sure it was exactly like that, but you get the picture. She looked like she saw a ghost. Turns out it was a baby mouse, and it was hiding in the sheets. I have fitted sheets, and it got caught in the elastic of the fitted sheet. So when she took away the covers, it jumped out and scampered away. And of course, Betty scampered after it. She temporarily failed to do her job, and that is to capture the mouse and torture it, unfortunately, until its passing. I remember at the time, my home health aide was recovering from her shock, and I said, "Oh, no wonder why Betty was jumping around in the middle of the night. She probably saw it on the floor and brought it up to the bed and took her paw off the mouse, and it scampered under the covers with me." And immediately my home health aide said, "Why didn't you go berserk?" And I thought to myself, is that something other people do? And I think yes, the answer is yes. That's something other people do. And truth be told, I was glad the mouse got away. He belongs in his mouse home with his mouse friends, although Betty, my cat, agreed to disagree with me. She was watching the floor very attentively, waiting for the mouse to come out. I said to Betty, "I don't think he's coming back," but she kept watching. And then 3 hours later, sure enough, someone said to me, "She's got the mouse in her mouth. She's playing with it." And I said, "Oh, let me see." Now I was interested. But alas, she played with it until it died. And then we had a dead mouse on our hand, which my aide had to dispose of, because, as anyone knows that has a cat who has caught a mouse, they will kick it after it's dead, hoping that it will jump up on its feet and run again. So there was a happy ending, although not for the mouse, and we could all relax, get back to our jobs, and I was reminded once again why I have my cat Betty. I was filled with gratitude for my many blessings. I hope you enjoyed that story. Now, back to the episode. Many of us right now want to get back to nature when it comes to food. We do things like purchase produce from local farmers or farmers markets, co-ops, whole foods, plant nutrition, mindful eating, etc. So it might be a logical thing to bring back this whole idea or approach to food called intuitive eating theory. After all, when we're born and we're little babies, we cry when we are hungry, then we eat, then we stop crying until we're hungry again. Seems pretty logical. But does it work once we become adolescents and adults, with all the other factors that come into play, especially with the connection between eating and emotions? One study they did on pudding suggests maybe not. Now, they separated the subjects into two groups, the toddlers in one group and the adults in the other. And they were planning to give them both the pudding with regular sugar, so therefore high in calories, and the diet pudding, same flavor, think it was chocolate, that was made with artificial sweeteners and therefore sugar-free and lower in calories. And the question they were asking is, when do they stop eating? In other words, do they stop when they feel like they've had enough? Do they finish the pudding, or do they stop when they're satisfied and then eat no more? and I think you know where I'm going with this. The children who ate the diet pudding had no trouble finishing it, but when the children ate the high-calorie pudding, they didn't finish it in many cases. In other words, they were full and stopped because their brain told them that they've had enough calories. The adults, on the other hand, polished off the pudding in both cases, both the diet and the high-calorie, high-sugar pudding. So that's suggested to most people in the nutrition biz that we need rules governing how much we eat. Kind of like the difference between cats and dogs that way. But when I looked at this intuitive eating theory again, I asked myself this question. Was intuitive eating ever about eating whatever we want, whenever we want? Or did we just interpret it that way? A lot of registered dietitians have avoided this topic or have openly been against it because of the fear that intuitive eating will be interpreted as, if you want fast food every day, then have fast food every day, and then you'll be happy. And then, of course, they go on a roller coaster of gaining, losing, and gaining again. Dietitians have also seen themselves as the bearer of bad news, or the bad cop, as the saying goes. Plenty of people have sat across from me and said, I don't know if I can go on living without my coffee colada and my bear claw. So we dietitians like to stay clear of telling everyone, if your intuition is telling you to eat as much as you want, then go crazy. Because that doesn't jive with what most people want when they walk in or call up a dietitian, which is to lose weight. So I, and just about everyone else, stayed away from this topic until recently. Then I read an article by a dietitian named Jessica Jones, who sparked my interest in this once again. Here is what she said, quote, intuitive eating and weight loss aren't really compatible. This is because intuitive eating and weight loss are not answers to the same question. They are, in and of themselves, their own distinctive goals. Okay, so let's start at the beginning and define intuitive eating. Back in 1995, only 25 years ago, two dietitians by the name of Evelyn Tribole and Elsie Resch came up with this theory in response to an epidemic of yo-yo dieting. It is basically a behavior-based approach, rather than a you can eat this but don't eat that approach. And we all know this to be true. The dieting approach often leaves people feeling deprived when they are told to limit the food that they really enjoy eating. We used to call it behavioral modification. The idea that these two dietitians came up with was to heal our relationship to food and help people tune in to their hunger and satiety cues, as we did when we were babies. But it's been mistakenly marketed as a weight loss strategy, which doesn't work for adults. So as we grow older, we lose our inner intuitive eater. We use sweets as a reward. When we are kids, we are scolded to eat the overcooked, bland broccoli on our plates. And we felt guilty when we ate the so-called bad foods. So this intuitive eating strategy sprouted up in 1995 when many of us were heavier than we wanted to be, and strict dieting seemed to make matters worse. So it's not a diet, and there are no dietary rules to be followed. It's about listening to our intuition to determine when to eat and when to stop eating. The purpose is to eliminate the guilt around eating and to get pleasure from eating the food that we love. The long-term goal is to eventually reduce binging or overeating of these so-called sinful foods, which are high in fat, sodium, or sugar. I'll give you links in the show notes to their book, which is now in its 4th edition. The book is called Intuitive Eating. In the workbook that goes along with it, it's subtitled 10 Principles for Nourishing a Healthy Relationship with Food. So far so good there. I thought I'd just summarize the 10 principles and you can get an idea about where they are going with this whole thing. Number 1, the first principle is to, quote, reject the diet mentality, end quote. They suggest that it's not about your lack of willpower or your weakness or your lust for, say, Little Debbie Swiss rolls. Diets are set up for failure because psychologically, diets are punishing as they tell us what we cannot eat, and then it becomes the foods we crave. It also fails psychologically because if we seriously restrict our calories, our bodies want to avoid starvation at all costs, and we start to gain weight on fewer calories than we did prior to the diet. Diet advertisers insist that it's easy and quick when common sense tells us otherwise. I totally agree with all of that. Number 2, honor your hunger. Although I know where they are going with this, I think there may have been a better way to say it. Hunger is quite normal. It is a way of our body telling us that it wants to eat. The goal here may be more to separate the anxiety around hunger with the feeling of hunger. There are mindfulness exercises that were put out by Jon Kabat-Zinn that may help you if you feel anxious when you get that sense of hunger. When you say you're hungry, is your stomach rumbling, or have you not eaten in a while and are not within reach of something in your cabinet? That's what we mean by mindfulness. Number 3, make peace with food. This I totally agree with. But then they go on to say that you should give yourself unconditional permission to eat whatever you want. That advice can be misconstrued if what you want to do is lose weight. Foods themselves, of course, are not good or bad, but there are clearly foods that, if you eat them in large portions and frequently, you will be gaining weight rather than losing it. They do bring home the point that deprivation or strict restriction will cause you to crave foods and ultimately overeat them. Then guilt results, and of course I totally agree with that as well. Number 4, challenge the food police. That should be in quotes, not my words. What she is talking about here is the devil in your brain that says you're bad if you eat a rich dessert. Again, guilt ensues. What she also says here is that it's impossible to see eating as normal and, dare I say, pleasurable when the food police are goose-stepping in your head. Very good point. Number 5, feel your fullness. This is essentially a mindfulness exercise, which can be very helpful. Dieting, as we all know, is about the rules. Do this, don't do that. We are programmed to think that leaving food on our plate can be culturally a taboo. So what they're suggesting is that you could stop when you've eaten about half the food on your plate and ask yourself, how full do I feel? Does the food still taste yummy? Or am I just shoveling the food in? Am I eating more because I am not yet full, or because it may be many hours before my next meal? Number 6, discover the satisfaction factor. Now, I'm not sure that the satisfaction factor is going to hit home with many people. What these two women are implying here is that you are more likely to overeat food if it is not what you preferentially want to eat. In other words, the food is not satisfying. Okay, that's a good point, but I feel that that point may have been covered elsewhere. Number 7, cope with your emotions without using food. Amen to that. They go on to explain that we often eat for reasons other than physical hunger. When I'm counseling someone and they say something like, I get hungry at night when I'm watching TV, I might respond by saying, can you describe that feeling? Their answer often tells me where to go from there. We all know that emotional eating is a real thing, and of course we can feel guilty about it. That is also a real thing. And of course now we are all thinking, well, easier said than done. Here they encourage their readers to build up coping skills, which may then allow us to go back to the intuitive eating. So no argument there. Number 8, respect your body. Absolutely agree here. We are all too critical of ourselves, especially us women. Number 9, exercise. Full stop. Hard to argue with that. We all know about endorphins and the burning of calories, and the reduction of anxiety we feel, and the improvement in our sleep patterns. But she also makes another point that fits into the intuitive eating narrative. And I've heard myself say this on a number of occasions. She says, do the activity that you enjoy doing. If you're a social person, find something to do with friends. If you like to plop on the couch and watch TV after a long day, get one of those foot pedaling exercises and pedal while you watch TV. She makes another point here. If you exercise and you're doing something you dread only because you want to eat more high-calorie food, that may backfire on you. You actually don't burn that many calories with an hour of exercise. Of course, there is some variation depending on what you do, but you're going to have to do a lot to cover that bear claw. Number 10, honor your health with gentle nutrition. Now, I do this nutrition thing for a living, and I'm not sure what she meant by that sentence. Luckily, they went on to explain it. They assure you that no one eats perfectly, and it's really about consistently eating healthy foods over time. But food should be tasty and satisfying. Full stop again. Once you feel better about your body and can reduce the guilt you feel, you can then ask yourself how you feel when you eat a relatively healthy food versus how you feel when you eat junk food. You may surprise yourself with the answer. Okay, so that's the philosophy in a nutshell. I agree in principle to many of the points that they bring up, but I also want to counter with one point that was discussed by that dietitian named Jessica Jones in a magazine article, and it's this, quote, "It is not just about hunger and satiety. If it is noon and you're not hungry, you eat anyway because you may be at work and your lunch break is noon." End quote. We live in the real world that way. In that case, you shouldn't go hungry until, say, 6 p.m., because ultimately, if you get too hungry, that could result in anxiety, which can then result in overeating. Jessica Jones goes on to say this, quote, "The truth is intuitive eating is its own journey, and it takes a lot of work to get to a place where you can really let go of the diet mentality." End quote. I'll give you a link to that in the show notes as well. I could go on, but I think you get the picture with this. We are really talking about two separate goals that intercept each other. Overall, the goal, I hope, is to put down our cell phones and enjoy food that is tasty with people that we love around the table. Maybe not too close right now, or maybe even on Zoom, but let's at least enjoy the food and the people we love. With techniques like, say, mindfulness, or yoga, or meditation, or exercise, or music, or nature, we can hopefully manage the stress both around eating and overall. I know it's a difficult year to think about managing stress, but it can only help. If we also want to lose weight, and we are practicing this intuitive lifestyle, we will be more likely to be okay with eating less if we are enjoying what we're eating. I think if you're interested in this approach, and again, it can only help, irregardless of whether you want to lose weight or not, you should get their book and give it a read. That's all I have for you today. Be well and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing Outside the Box.